correspondent Elise Labott. Elise, if you could just read us the entirety of this letter.
Poppy, this letter is really stunning, not just because of the news it contains, but the way it's written to Kim Jong Un from President Trump. It's addressed to His Excellency Kim Jong Un, chairman of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And it goes, "Dear Mr. Chairman, we greatly appreciate your time, patience, and effort with respect to our recent negotiations and discussions relative to a summit long sought by both parties, which was scheduled to take place on June 12th in Singapore. We were informed that the meeting was requested by North Korea, but that to us is totally irrelevant. I look very much forward to being there with you. Based on the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed in your most recent statement, I feel it is inappropriate at this time to have this long-planned meeting. Therefore, please let this letter serve to represent that the Singapore summit for the good of both parties, but to the detriment of the world, will not take place. Your talk about nuclear capabilities, but ours are so massive and powerful that I pray to God they will never have to be used. I felt a wonderful dialogue was building up between you and me, and ultimately it is only that dialogue that matters. Someday I look very much forward to meeting you. In the meantime, I want to thank you for the release of the hostages who are now home with their families. That was a beautiful gesture and very much appreciated. If you change your mind having to do with this most important summit, please do not hesitate to call me or write. The world, and North Korea in particular, has lost a great opportunity for lasting peace and great prosperity and wealth. This missed opportunity is a truly sad moment
Elise,
in history, and we see
Elise,
Secretary of State Pompeo walking in.
Elise, thank you for reading the letter. Stay with us, Elise, because this was already a significant hearing, now much more significant. This is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who has met twice with Kim Jong Un, setting the groundwork for this summit that was supposed to happen between the president and Kim Jong Un. He will testify now in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. You will hear from him, his opening remarks, in just moments. As we wait for that, Jim Sciutto, let me get to you and the significance of this letter. And I'm so glad you pointed out moments ago, this is not a political story. This is about global security, national security. What stands out to you, Jim?
What a remarkable letter, and so clearly in President Trump's voice. This reads like it was dictated right from his mouth, a beautiful gesture. It sounds very much like Donald Trump, but just a few lines apart, you have the President of the United States, in effect, threatening or making clear that the U.S. has the ability to wipe out North Korea. Ours are so massive and powerful, that is, nuclear capabilities, that I pray to God they will never have to be used. Fire and fury, but by different rhetoric there. And then a few lines later, as if you're writing an email to a friend, please do not hesitate to call me or write. A remarkable...
Let's listen to the Secretary of State.
The State Department recently transmitted to Chairman Kim and North Korea. The letter is to Chairman Kim Jong Un, Chairman of the State Affairs Commission of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And it reads as follows: Dear Mr. Chairman, we greatly appreciate your time, patience, and effort with respect to our recent negotiations and discussions relative to a summit long sought by both parties, which was scheduled to take place on June 12th in Singapore. We were informed that the meeting was requested by North Korea, but that to us is totally irrelevant. I was very much looking forward to being there with you. Sadly, based on the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed in your most recent statement, I feel it is appropriate at this time to have this long-planned meeting, or inappropriate, excuse me. I feel it is inappropriate at this time to have this long-planned meeting. Therefore, please let this letter serve to represent that the Singapore summit, for the good of both parties, but to the detriment of the world, will not take place. You talk about your nuclear capabilities, but ours are so massive and powerful that I pray to God they will never have to be used. I felt that a wonderful dialogue was building up between you and me, and ultimately is only that dialogue that matters. Someday, I look very much forward to meeting you. In the meantime, I want to thank you for the release of the hostages who are now home with their families. That was a beautiful gesture and was very much appreciated. If you change your mind having to do with this important summit, please do not hesitate to call me or write. The world, and North Korea in particular, has lost a great opportunity for lasting peace and great prosperity and wealth. This missed opportunity is a truly sad moment in history. Sincerely yours, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. We want to thank you for joining us today, and although you're here for a confirmation, you were here just 6 weeks ago for your confirmation hearing. In just a month, again, I want to commend you on an energetic and forceful start to your tenure. We hold a budget hearing each year, and that's the formal subject of today's meeting. But as you and I have talked, budgets coming from the administration these days and for many years are not really focused on that much, as you know, and there's a process we go through here to really determine what expenditures are going to be made. So since it really doesn't have a great effect on the outcomes here, it would be my guess that there really won't be many questions around the budget, and I think you know that, even though you're going to present it, fulfilling your responsibilities. While discussing the budget is not a productive use of our time today, in all likelihood, I'm hopeful that your remarks will outline your management plan for the department and steps that you've taken thus far on that front. I also want to discuss with you our efforts to update authorities we use to fight terror abroad. And just for members on both sides of the aisle, today we've agreed to 2 rounds of questions if necessary. And we realize that they're having questions around the AUMF, and so I know many questions may focus on the AUMF we've been discussing in recent times. Our bipartisan legislation would replace the 2001 and 2002 AUMFs with updated AUMF against al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. It provides the administration the flexibility necessary to win this fight while strengthening the rightful and necessary role of Congress. And I believe it is the best chance we have to finally address this issue in a constructive way for the first time in almost 17 years. Since last June, our committee has held 4 public hearings, a classified briefing, and a number of meetings on authorizing the use of military force. We have heard testimony from legal scholars, policy experts, and secretaries of state and defense twice. During your confirmation hearing, you testified that you believe that we should update the AUMF and that you would welcome continuing to work with us towards that end. I know you've had experience working on this topic when you served in the House, and I appreciate your support for Congress's appropriate role with respect to this important issue. I also hope while you're here that you can speak to our strategy to get a new and better Iran deal now that we have withdrawn from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. As you know, along with a majority of the colleagues on this committee, we staunchly oppose the JCPOA because it allowed Iran to maintain an enrichment capacity, and the limits on that enrichment capacity expired after only 10 or 15 years. While I'm disappointed, no doubt, that the Europeans were unable to reach an arrangement with the administration to address the serious flaws in the JCPOA, I'm hopeful that moving forward, a new agreement that addresses Iran's nefarious nuclear and non-nuclear activities can be reached. With Iran's proxies performing well in the recent Iraqi and Lebanese elections, as well as Iran's rising threat to our partner Israel and Syria, transatlantic alignment and countering Iran comprehensively has never been more important. I know you share that belief and have spoken to that recently.
All right,
So
you
I'm
just
eager to
heard
hear
the
your
Secretary of
thoughts on
State, Mike Pompeo, read in full the letter, the remarkable letter that was just written by President Trump to Chairman Kim Jong Un of North Korea. And now this was meant to be a budget hearing about the budget. And so they're going through some of this technical stuff that's required. We're going to keep monitoring this as soon as they begin speaking about North Korea. And the fact that President Trump has canceled this summit that was set to take place in Singapore in just a few weeks, we will get right back to it so you can hear the Secretary of State in full. In the meantime, we have all of our players, Sierra Elise Labbick, Caitlin Collins, Jim Sciutto, our Ivan Watson is in Seoul. And Jim, if I could go back to you, if you can hear me, Jim, I interrupted you in the middle of your important thought here.
No problem. Listen, we got to hear from the state Secretary of State there, but a remarkable letter here that the president, clearly disappointed about this, but going back to fire and fury rhetoric with different words, threatening nuclear capabilities so massive and so powerful that I pray to God they will never have to be used, saying again, mine is bigger than yours in effect here in terms of those nuclear capabilities. But then this very conversational tone of, please don't hesitate to call me or write. Now, what's significant about that is he does not in this letter say that there will never be a summit ever. He says for now this summit is off, perhaps leaving the door open there to if there are better conditions, if North Korea's rhetoric tamps down, if they don't make the comments like they've made in the last 24 hours, that he would be open to revisiting this idea. That is key because, as I said earlier, Poppy, this is no Washington story.
Jim Sciutto, I apologize to interrupt you again, but I do have to go to our Will Ripley, our correspondent, who is inside of North Korea. To remind our viewers, Will Ripley, hours ago, traveled far into North Korea to witness the destruction of one of North Korea's nuclear sites. They were doing this in front of Western journalists to try to sort of make a point ahead of this summit. Will Ripley joins me on the phone now. Will, as you learn about this news that President Trump has written this letter to Kim Jong Un canceling the summit, what is your reaction and what are you hearing from those around you inside of North Korea right now?
Well, Poppy, we were just sitting kind of wrapping up the day. It's now late in the evening here. We are on the train headed back to Wonsan after witnessing the what North Korea claims is the destruction of the nuclear site at Punggye-ri. So we were sitting around the table and I got the phone call and read out the letter from President Trump. And I can tell you there was just a real sense of shock amongst the people that I was sitting with, the North Korean officials. They didn't give any official comment, but immediately they got up and left and are now on the phone kind of relaying the news up to the top. And imagine how they're feeling at this moment, given the fact that they just blew up their nuclear site today as a sign, they say, of their willingness to denuclearize. They were doing this to make a point, as you mentioned, ahead of the summit in Singapore on June 12th that was scheduled with President Trump, that until literally minutes ago, they thought was still going to happen. Mm-hmm. That said, the North Koreans have said that they're not going to beg for dialogue, and they were infuriated by comments made by the Vice President, Mike Pence, and before that, President Trump's National Security Advisor, John Roberts, talking about North Korea, saying that North Korea could follow the Libya model. Of course, Gaddafi in Libya gave up his nuclear weapons and was overthrown by U.S.-backed rebels and died several years later. And they say they're unwilling to accept that here.
Will Ripley, continue. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just was saying that the North Koreans have said that they're not going to beg for dialogue. They have said they'd be willing to walk away if they don't like what they're hearing from the United States. But the fact that they went through with this trip, you know, they invited us in and we were kind of on hold for 24 hours. I was frankly unsure if this was actually going to happen, but the trip did happen. We were taken to the nuclear site. We spent 9 hours. We watched them blow up 3 tunnels in the nuclear site and all of the buildings on the site as well. And we don't have experts here to verify with us if this destruction is if it's absolute, if it means that the nuclear site is unusable, as the North Koreans claim. But they say, they told us we're being transparent here. We're showing you our nuclear site for the first time foreign journalists have ever visited. We're blowing it up. We're willing to denuclearize. We're willing to talk with the United States, but they don't want to be compared to Libya, a country whose government was overthrown after giving up its nuclear weapons. And that's why they felt they had to respond with that very strongly worded statement targeting the Vice President Mike Pence. They've also targeted President Trump's National Security Advisor as well, saying that they don't want him in Singapore. They don't want anybody in Singapore that they feel is going to disrespect them. But nonetheless, being inside this country just hours after they've blown up the nuclear site and learning of this, it was a very awkward and uncomfortable moment, and we'll have to see what happens in the coming hours and days on the ground here.
Will, thank you for that.